Hi, welcome everybody. This is episode 2 of In the Chair with Imogene Nix, and I'm your hostess, Imogene. Now, today's episode, we have got an interview with Elizabeth Ellen Carter, and she's talking some slightly controversial ideas that affect today's romance authors. Secondly, we have got Of Fire and Roses, a review of Danielle Belwater's first book from the Alana's Chronicles, and that'll be Charlotte will be presenting that to you. And then last up, this time we've got all the latest gossip from the romance world, so make sure you stay tuned. Oh, and that's right, there's also some giveaways. I'll tell you more about that later. Just keep watching. Well, the other day I was down on the Gold Coast and I had the opportunity to talk to my good friend Elizabeth Ellen Carter. She is a multi-published author and her latest book on the go is Captive of the Corsairs, So let's find out more and hear what Elizabeth had to say. Oh, good morning, Elizabeth. Welcome to In the Chair.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Imogene. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Hey, I wanted to ask you, you started writing romance some time ago. What was it that propelled you into writing romance?
I had a scene in my head for years, and it's one of these things that I'd go to sleep and this scene would roll out in my head, and I thought, you know what, the only way I'm going to get a decent night's sleep ever again, if I write it down, I'll be rid of it then, and then before I knew it, I had a novel. That's
pretty cool, isn't it? Romance comes with all sorts of things that people have got a lot of preconceived notions about romance. Yeah. How does that work with your previous experience?
I've done writing of all sorts for years, journalism, advertising, copywriting, script writing. Novel writing is just another discipline of writing, but it's definitely its distinct discipline. People who say to me, oh, I'd love to write a novel, but I don't have any writing experience. I tell them, look, that really doesn't matter. What matters is the story. Everything else is just a style, and that will come later.
Cool. Now, in your novel Nocturne, there's a lot of references to music. Can you expand on that?
I wanted to have a play with a gothic romance, and Nocturne was the title that came. Funnily enough, the music came afterwards. And I used it to really help create a sensory experience because the hero of the piece is blind.
Oh, okay.
So that music was a way of him expressing himself, interacting with the outside world, but it was also emotionally driven. So I had a great time really exploring the beginning of what we know as romantic music and classical music that really came about in the early 19th century.
Oh, wow. Now, one of the things that has been happening lately on your Facebook page is you've been chatting about a couple of little issues. So I can go little. What do you see at the moment are the biggest issues for romance writers or writers in general?
Oh, look, you're talking about the copyright issue, of course.
Well, that's one.
That's one. Did we talk about the other one as well?
No, we didn't, but you did put it on your Facebook.
Okay, well, let's talk about the copyright one in particular, because that, of course, is important to all authors because it's how we get paid.
It is.
What is interesting, this is part of the Australian Productivity Commission's look into copyright and intellectual property. Some of the things I don't think people would have a disagreement with, the idea of fair use, which the Americans have, but we don't. Sort of limited use of somebody else's copyright for expanding a thesis or a blog, something like that, no one would question. The thing that really got my goat was learning that there is a proposal to limit copyright, which is currently life plus 70 years, to 20 years after the creation of a work. The ludicrous thing about it is you could potentially be competing against people in the marketplace for the dollars for a work that you created, which nobody else had any input in. But the government turns around and says, it's 20 years, you've got to give it up. For instance, can anyone imagine J.K. Rowling being at all happy knowing that if this thing, applied from now, that her very first Harry Potter book would next year be in the public domain?
See, and that then falls into another category as well, which is if my book is published in the UK or the US and there's a different period of copyright involved, which one then is going to take precedence?
Well, this is it. Australia, because it signed the free trade agreement with the United States in 2004, we follow the American, which is life plus 70. All of this, and people come back and say, oh, well, there's international treaties, so your copyright is protected. But you know what? International treaties can be changed with a stroke of a pen.
That's right.
Without reference to the public. So it is important that these things are raised and objections are raised now, so we can continue to assert copyright.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, the next thing I was going to ask you about was the other issue, the issue that was raised, and there was a few of us when we saw it. Would you like to expand on that one? You can say no.
No. I'm quite. Hey, look, it's my husband who reins me in, saying you might want to be just a little less controversial, and I go, nah, what's the fun in that?
Controversy's the spice of life.
It is, and this is the concept that particular tropes in romance are inherently sexist. And one particular example that was used was a meet cute in a particular story in which there's ballsy businesswoman stumbles in the street, loses her briefcase full of stuff. A gentleman who she is immediately smitten by helps her pick up her stuff. He gives her a kiss, and that is their first meeting. That's a bit rape, isn't it?
Yeah, and the problem with that is we need to remember, as professionals, what we're writing is fantasy.
It is fantasy, and people know the difference between fantasy and reality. If we didn't, then anybody who watched Game of Thrones ought to be locked up, or Breaking Bad, or Sons of Anarchy, or anything like that, because they are romanticizing, if you want to put it that way, crimes that are actually quite horrendous, but it's storytelling, and this is what we do as human beings. We tell stories to either entertain ourselves, to educate ourselves, to learn more about ourselves as human beings. There is a difference, a great difference.
I'm in a lot of trouble then, because I kill people with light bulbs, so I'm really in trouble.
Oh, my husband is so upset because I keep killing secondary characters that he loves.
But that goes with the storylines, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, talking about storylines, what are you currently working on?
I am working on a Captive of the Corsairs, which is a Regency with a difference because it's set in Sicily and Tunisia. I was fascinated to read about the Barbary Coast pirates, and they were North Africa. They were sponsored by the Ottoman Empire, and between 1650 and 1830, they enslaved anywhere between 800,000 and 1.25 million Europeans, some as far away as Iceland.
Wow, that's pretty far-reaching.
So when we talk about issues around slavery and quite rightly the denunciation and the making illegal of slavery that came in the late 18th century, we think about African slaves quite rightly, but we also forget that these slavers were also enslaving Europeans as well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to examine that from a thematic and dramatic element there as well. And that's what I like doing with my stories, taking a period of history which is real and humanizing it by creating characters that people fall in love with as they fall in love with one another.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Oh, romance.
Okay, now where can we find you online?
I am at eecarter.com. I'm always on Facebook, Elizabeth Ellen Carter. You'll also find me on Twitter and Instagram as well.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So we're back again. Next up, we've got Charlotte, one of our team of reviewers, is looking at Of Fire and Roses by Danielle Belwater. I'd be really interested to see what she thinks. Keep watching.
My name is Charlotte, and today we'll be reviewing Of Fire and Roses, which is the first in the Alanis series by Danielle Belwater. The Bewares, there is death and supernatural themes like a ghost. I recommend children at least 16, 17 before reading it. The book is about a young man named Nate, and he moves to a new town after the death of his mother with his father. And one day he meets a girl named Cora Ewell, who is suffering the effects of a curse, which has been haunting her family for several generations. What attracted me to the book was definitely the whole supernatural angle. I'm a fan of ghosts and supernatural mysteries, and so I was intrigued definitely about what this book would have to offer, especially being the first in a series. My favourite character will have to be one of the supporting cast, Josh, who is easily the most entertaining of all the characters. Whenever he's in the story, you can't help but laugh, and his fate kind of upset me a bit at the very end. I think I cried a little bit because he was that good a character, and I was personally the most invested in him as a whole. My least favourite character is the father of our main character, Nate. While he wasn't bad by any standard, he was not very developed as much as some of the other characters. He spends the whole book moping and in a pretty depressed state, which makes him quite unlikable. The most redeeming fact about him was his interactions with Josh's mother. My favourite scene is pretty early in the book, after Nate meets Josh for the first time. He invites him out to the lake the very next day, and Nate very soon finds out that he is a walking stopwatch, in his own words, as Josh is always there, seconds on time, never late, never early, but exactly on time. My general statement of the book is that it's good. I really enjoyed it. I was invested in some of the characters, but the pacing was too slow and too fast at times. It very much alternated between the two. It didn't hit that middle steady ground. I recommend it definitely as a first book in the series. It's a 4 for me. I would like to read the rest of the series, and I'm very curious to see how it ends and what happens next, especially with the many mysteries surrounding some of the characters, the villain, and the major plot points in the book.
Thanks so much for staying tuned. Now we've got the prize pack. Woohoo! We always love giving away goodies to you, our wonderful viewers. So today you've got to do the same as we asked last time. You need to go to www.imogenenix.net/theblog. If you can't find it, it's at the top of the website. Now, follow that in the blog. You'll see episode 2. We've got the rafflecopter embedded. We've also got the announcement of last episode's winners. So make sure you go and check, see if you're one of them. Last but not least, we've got the gossip, and we'll be presenting that in a moment. Of Blood and Snow, Book 2 in the Alanis Chronicles has a cover and will be released with Evernight Teen. More details coming soon. Starline is re-releasing with Beach Book Press in July. It's the second in the Warriors of the Elector series. It will be available in the 3rd week of the month. Taking His Patient's Virtue is the latest release from Vixen von Fock. It's very hot and can be found on Amazon. Star of Ishtar is re-releasing from Beach Book Press. Currently 99 cents. It can be found on Amazon and Beach Book Press, as well as other digital bookstores. Kathleen Kelly has just released Savage Sacrifice. This is book 5 in the Savage Angels MC series, and you can find it on Amazon. Love in a Sunburnt Country, 8 true stories of love from the outback, have released in Mirror in June. The Romance Writers of Australia Ripping Start results are in. Congratulations to Cassandra Pennington on her first place, also to runners-up Joe McAllister and AJ McPherson. Gossip has it that Lexi Cooper has just signed a contract with Entangled Publishing for Sinful Strokes, and we recommend staying tuned for more details. Sadly, we've received news that in May, Jo Beverley, a stalwart of the historical romance genre, passed away, and we extend our condolences to her family. Okay, so we've come to the end of episode 2. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. Remember, go check out the website and also subscribe to this channel. We're here every fortnight bringing romance to you. I'll see you next time. Imogene out.